The signal in the dark. The Galactic Coalition was on the brink of defeat. For years, they had been locked in a brutal war against the Crix, a mysterious and terrifying enemy that seemingly appeared out of nowhere. The Crix's bio-organic ships, pulsating with unnatural life, tore through Coalition fleets like a predatory swarm. The once proud Coalition was now fractured, with its once vast territories reduced to a scattering of embattled systems. Morale was dangerously low, and resources were stretched thin. In the Coalition's last-ditch effort, the Valorian, a highly advanced species known for their scientific brilliance, scanned the farthest reaches of the galaxy for any source of hope. That was when they found it. A faint, almost imperceptible signal buried deep within the static of the cosmos. It was old, very old. So ancient, in fact, that many thought it a ghost, an echo from an era long past. Aboard the Coalition's flagship, the Ascendant, a meeting was called. High-ranking military officials and leading scientists gathered in a dimly lit briefing room. Admiral Tessa Drake stood at the head of the table, her expression set in stone. She had led many campaigns against the Crix, and each battle had taken its toll on her. The war had left scars across her body and soul, but she remained unyielding, a symbol of human resilience. Dr. Callan Farron, a Valorian scientist, took the floor. His thin, translucent skin glowed faintly under the dim lights, a sign of his species' advanced bioluminescence. "We've decoded the signal," he began, his voice steady but laced with excitement. A holographic map materialized above the table, showing a distant, uncharted sector of the galaxy. "It originates from here. We believe it to be a long-lost human vessel, specifically the Eternal Sentinel." Gasps echoed through the room. The Eternal Sentinel was a legendary supercarrier, a relic from the early days of human space exploration. It was rumored to have been equipped with technologies far beyond anything the Coalition currently had at its disposal. But it had vanished without a trace centuries ago, its existence whispered about in myths and legends. Commander Lyra Kell, a sharp-witted strategist, frowned. "And you believe this ship could help us turn the tide against the Crix?" Dr. Farron nodded. "If the records are accurate, the Eternal Sentinel possesses firepower and defensive capabilities far superior to anything in our current fleets. It may be our only chance to stand against the Crix." Admiral Drake remained silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on the map. Finally, she spoke. "We can't afford to ignore this. Assemble a team. We're going to that sector." The decision was made swiftly, and the crew worked tirelessly to prepare the expedition. The Eternal Sentinel represented a glimmer of hope in a galaxy overshadowed by darkness. If it could be reactivated, it could mean salvation for the entire Coalition. Into the void. The Coalition's expeditionary fleet set out within days, led by Admiral Tessa Drake aboard the Ascendant. It was a modest force, as most of the remaining Coalition ships were needed at the front lines to hold off the relentless Crix onslaught. Still, the fleet was equipped with some of the most advanced technology available: cutting-edge Valorian scanners, powerful electromagnetic shields, and an array of cloaking devices designed to keep them hidden from potential threats. Their destination lay in the darkest corner of the galaxy, an uncharted system on the fringes of known space. For weeks they traveled through the void, passing dead stars and ancient nebulae that had long since cooled into lifeless dust. The sector was eerily quiet, a forgotten pocket of the universe untouched by the wars and politics of the galactic civilizations. Admiral Drake stood on the bridge of the Ascendant, her eyes scanning the expanse of stars through the large observation window. Despite her stoic demeanor, she felt the weight of the mission pressing down on her. The crew could sense it too. The tension in the air was palpable. Dr. Farron worked tirelessly with his team, poring over the signal's data as they neared their destination. Every minute detail had to be examined to ensure they wouldn't be walking into a trap. But as far as their scans could tell, the signal remained unchanged. It was weak but consistent, pulsing from deep within a massive asteroid field. Commander Lyra Kell approached Admiral Drake, breaking the silence on the bridge. "We'll be arriving at the signal's location soon, Admiral. No signs of any hostiles so far, but this part of space feels strange." Drake nodded, her gaze still fixed on the stars. "Strange doesn't even begin to cover it, Commander. But we didn't come all this way for comfort. Prepare the landing teams." As they entered the asteroid field, the Ascendant carefully navigated between the massive rocks, some as large as small moons. The field was dense, and the risk of collision was high, but the ship's advanced systems handled the maneuvers with precision. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the origin of the signal. There, hidden among the asteroids, was the Eternal Sentinel. The sight was breathtaking. The ship was colossal, far larger than anything they had imagined. It dwarfed even the Ascendant, its massive hull covered in battle scars and debris from countless engagements long forgotten. The Supercarrier floated silently, as if in a state of deep slumber, its once proud frame now caked in the dust of centuries. But despite its age, there was something undeniably powerful about it, something awe-inspiring. Admiral Drake couldn't help but feel a sense of reverence as she gazed upon the ancient vessel. It was a relic of a time when humanity had been bold and unafraid to push the boundaries of space exploration. She could almost hear the echoes of the past, the hum of engines, and the roar of battle as the Eternal Sentinel had once carved its name into the stars. "Is it functional?" Commander Kell asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Farron's eyes were wide with wonder as he stared at the data on his console. "It's hard to say. We're still detecting faint power readings, but the systems are dormant. If we can get aboard, there's a chance we could restore it." Drake nodded decisively. "We're going in. Prepare a boarding team." Within the hour, a shuttle was prepped and launched from the Ascendant, carrying Admiral Drake, Commander Kell, Dr. Farron, and a team of engineers and security personnel. As they approached the Eternal Sentinel, the scale of the ship became even more apparent. Its hull was a labyrinth of corridors and hangars, large enough to house entire fleets of smaller ships. The shuttle docked with one of the ancient hangars, and the team made their way inside. The interior was dark and silent, the air stale from centuries of disuse. Flashlights flickered on, illuminating the massive space around them. The walls were lined with old insignias, faded and worn, but still recognizable as early human designs. It was like stepping into a time capsule, a glimpse into humanity's long-forgotten past. Dr. Farron began scanning the area with his equipment, his expression focused. "The power core is still intact, but it's running at minimal levels. If we can reach the engineering deck, we might be able to bring the systems online." The team moved cautiously through the ship, their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty corridors. Every so often, they passed by the remains of long-dead crew members, their bodies preserved by the ship's environmental systems. It was a grim reminder of the dangers that had once accompanied space travel, and of the battles the Eternal Sentinel had fought in its prime. Finally, they reached the engineering deck. It was a massive chamber filled with ancient machinery, some of which looked almost alien in design. But at the center of it all was the power core, a massive sphere of energy, pulsating faintly with life. Dr. Farron and his team got to work immediately, carefully studying the systems and running diagnostics. The room buzzed with tension as they tried to figure out how to reactivate the ship without triggering any catastrophic malfunctions. Hours passed, and just when it seemed like they might be out of luck, a low hum filled the air. Lights flickered on across the ship. Consoles came to life, and the dormant systems began to awaken. The Eternal Sentinel stirred from its long slumber. Drake allowed herself a rare smile. "Well done, Doctor." Dr. Farron nodded, though his expression was one of both triumph and concern. The systems are coming online, but we're only at a fraction of the ship's full power. It's going to take time to fully restore everything. But even at a fraction of its power, the Eternal Sentinel was formidable. Its weapon systems hummed with potential, and its shields began to regenerate, slowly but surely. As the team worked to stabilize the ship's systems, an alert suddenly flashed on one of the consoles. Commander Kell moved quickly to investigate. "Admiral," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "We've got company. Crick's ships, closing in fast." The Cricks had found them. Admiral Drake's eyes hardened. The Eternal Sentinel may have been ancient, but it was still a supercarrier, and it wasn't going down without a fight. "Brace for battle," Drake ordered, her voice cold and resolute. "Let's see what this old giant is still capable of." "You said, battle of the past and present." The warning alarms blared through the Eternal Sentinel's half-awake systems as the Crick's warships closed in. The enemy force was small, scout ships and a few light frigates, but even a handful of Crick's vessels was a threat to the vulnerable Coalition fleet. Admiral Drake immediately activated her comms, linking to the Ascendant. "Prepare for immediate engagement. Defend the Sentinel at all costs. We're about to wake this beast fully." On board the Ascendant, the crew snapped into action. Weapons were primed, shields reinforced, and fighters launched. Admiral Drake had no choice but to rely on her fleet to hold off the Cricks long enough for them to restore the Sentinel to fighting shape. Inside the engineering bay, Dr. Farron and his team worked with feathered intensity. The ship's systems, though ancient, were designed with a robustness that far surpassed many modern vessels. The challenge wasn't getting them to function, it was doing so without blowing up the core. Sparks flew as engineers rewired conduits and recalibrated dormant subsystems. The hum of the ship grew louder with each passing minute, but so did the tension. Everyone knew time was running out. Outside, the battle began. The Crick's scout ships, sleek and predatory, darted through the asteroid field like sharks hunting prey. Their weaponry, though lighter than full warships, was still deadly. The Ascendant and its escorts maneuvered defensively, trying to draw the Cricks away from the Sentinel while avoiding the treacherous asteroids. The first shots fired were from the Cricks. Bright beams of green plasma streaked toward the Coalition fleet. A smaller frigate in Drake's fleet took a direct hit, its shields buckling under the assault. The Ascendant retaliated, its cannons spitting blue-white energy bolts, scoring direct hits on one of the Crick's ships. But there were too many of them. One of the Crick's frigates broke through the Coalition's defensive line, heading straight for the Eternal Sentinel. It launched a barrage of missiles, targeting the ancient ship's vulnerable sections. "We don't have much time," Dr. Farron yelled, his voice strained as he tried to maintain focus. "The Cricks are zeroing in on us." Commander Kell watched the alerts flash across the screens. The ship's automated defenses were still offline, but the missile detection system suddenly blinked into life. It tracked the incoming Crick salvo, but there was no active countermeasure to intercept them. Admiral Drake clenched her jaw. The situation was critical. She turned to Kell and Farron. "Can we activate any of the weapon systems now?" Farron hesitated. "I've managed to bring partial power to the ship's forward railguns, but they haven't been tested in centuries. They might misfire, or worse." "We don't have a choice." "Do it," Drake commanded. Farron took a deep breath, punched in the sequence, and prayed the ship still had some fight left in it. With a groan of ancient metal and circuitry, the Eternal Sentinel's massive forward railguns powered up. The glow of energy coursing through their barrels was both ominous and awe-inspiring. Drake keyed into the weapons control. "Target the Crick's frigate. Fire." The railguns discharged with a deafening roar, sending two solid slugs of magnetically accelerated metal hurtling toward the Crick's ship. In an instant, one of the slugs struck true, tearing through the frigate's shields and hull with devastating force. The Crick's vessel erupted into a fireball, debris scattering into the asteroid field. The Eternal Sentinel had fired its first shot in centuries, and it was a kill. The bridge crew of the Ascendant cheered as the frigate exploded, but the battle was far from over. More Crick's ships were closing in, and the Coalition's fleet was struggling to hold them off. Dr. Farron wiped sweat from his brow as more systems across the ship came online. Life support stabilized, more weapons began to hum with readiness, and even the shields flickered weakly to life. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give them a fighting chance. Shields are at 20%, one of the engineers reported. Not optimal, but it should hold off any more direct hits. That'll have to do for now, Farron said. We've managed to bring the ship's thrusters online as well, but full propulsion is still offline. We can move, barely. Drake's mind raced. The Cricks were relentless, and even though the Sentinel was awakening, they weren't out of danger yet. She couldn't afford to wait for the ship to fully restore itself. If they were going to survive, they needed to do more than defend themselves. They needed to strike back. "We need to take the fight to them," Drake said, her voice calm but firm. "Commander Kell, get us whatever maneuverability we can. We're going to engage the Cricks directly." Commander Kell blinked in surprise. Engage them? With only partial power. Drake's eyes gleamed with determination. This ship may be old, but it's a supercarrier for a reason. If we can get close enough, we'll have the firepower to wipe them out. Kell nodded, trusting the Admiral's instincts. "Understood. We'll make it happen." The Eternal Sentinel slowly began to move. It wasn't graceful, more of a lumbering giant shaking off the rust of eons, but it was moving. With Kell at the helm, the ship advanced toward the Cricks' forces, its ancient hull creaking and groaning as it powered forward. On the battlefield, the Cricks noticed the movement. More ships broke off from their skirmish with the Ascendant to converge on the Sentinel. They saw the lumbering giant as easy prey, unaware of the power it still held. Drake watched them approach, her gaze steely. She waited for the right moment, her finger hovering over the weapon's control. Then, as the Cricks ships drew into range, she gave the order. "Fire." The Eternal Sentinel rolled to life once again, its railguns and plasma cannons firing in unison. The space around the ship lit up with energy as the ancient weapons discharged with the fury of a bygone era. Cricks ships exploded left and right, torn apart by the sheer force of the Sentinel's firepower. The Cricks, realizing too late the mistake they had made, began to retreat, but the Sentinel was relentless. Drake pressed the attack, pushing the ship forward with all the power they could muster. By the time the Cricks managed to regroup and flee, the battlefield was littered with the wreckage of their ships. The Eternal Sentinel, though still barely operational, stood victorious. On the bridge of the Ascendant, the crew watched in stunned silence as the Cricks retreated. They had done it. They had survived. Admiral Drake took a deep breath, her heart still pounding from the intensity of the battle. She glanced at Commander Kell and Dr. Farron, both of whom were equally exhausted but triumphant. "Excellent work," Drake said, her voice filled with both pride and relief. "We've proven the Eternal Sentinel still has some fight left in her." Dr. Farron smiled weakly. "Indeed, but there's still much to do. We've only scratched the surface of this ship's potential." Drake nodded. "Then let's get to work. The Cricks won't stay away for long, and when they return, we'll be ready." Waking the sleeping giant, the dust of the battle was beginning to settle, but there was no time for celebration. Admiral Drake stood at the bridge of the Eternal Sentinel, staring out into the void where the remnants of the Cricks fleet had fled. She knew they would return, likely in greater numbers. The real challenge had yet to come. "Status report," Drake ordered, breaking the tense silence. Commander Kell scanned the systems and relayed the information. Shields are holding at 25%, weapons are operational but not fully recharged, and propulsion is still at minimal power. We've got life support stabilized throughout the ship, but the hyperdrive is offline. Dr. Farron, though tired, was already back to work, leading his team to reactivate more of the ship's dormant systems. He stepped forward, rubbing the back of his neck. "The Sentinel is old, she's responding, but it's a slow process. We need more time to bring her back to full operational status." Admiral Drake's gaze hardened. "Time is exactly what we don't have." The Cricks will be back, and they'll bring reinforcements. We need to be ready before they arrive. Drake's mind raced with possibilities. The Eternal Sentinel was a relic of a lost era, but it had the potential to be the game-changer they desperately needed. If they could unlock its full power, they might stand a chance against the Cricks' inevitable counterattack. But first, they needed to bring more of its systems online, especially its hyperdrive. Back in the engineering bay, Dr. Farron was coordinating with his team to restore the ship's most critical systems. They had already brought the weapons and shields online, but the power grid was still unstable. The ancient fusion cores needed a complete overhaul to operate at full efficiency. If they could stabilize them, the ship would be able to maneuver more effectively, and more importantly, they could escape if things went south. Farron. Drake's voice came over the comms, urgent but calm. I need you to prioritize the hyperdrive. We need an escape plan if the Cricks return in full force. I understand, Admiral, Farron replied, but the hyperdrive systems are in rough shape. It's going to take more than patchwork to get them functional. Do whatever you have to. I trust you to get it done. Farron nodded and turned back to his team. They were already working on rerouting power to the hyperdrive systems, but it was slow going. Years of neglect and disuse had left the ancient machinery brittle. Every step forward risked another system failure. As Farron inspected the hyperdrive core, something strange caught his eye. There were markings, inscriptions etched into the metal, faded but still legible. It looked like some kind of ancient code, a language far older than anything Farron had seen before. What is this? Farron muttered, tracing the symbols with his fingers. It was almost as if the ship's creators had left a message here, hidden away in the very heart of the vessel. One of his engineers, a linguistics specialist, approached and examined the markings. These inscriptions, they're not just decoration. It looks like they're part of the ship's design. Maybe they're connected to the ship's core functions. Farron's mind raced. If that's true, then understanding this code could be the key to unlocking the Sentinel's full potential. We need more data, the engineer said. I'll start cross-referencing these symbols with the ship's database, but it could take time to decode. Farron nodded. Do it. Whatever the ship is hiding, we need to uncover it, and fast. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Ascendant, the crew monitored the surrounding space. The Cricks had retreated, but they were not far off. Intelligence reports indicated that a much larger fleet was on the way, one that would overwhelm them if they weren't prepared. We need to buy more time, Drake said, her voice firm as she studied the tactical display. Commander Kell, I want you to take a small strike force and engage the Cricks before they can regroup. Delay them as long as possible, but don't engage in full-scale combat. We can't afford to lose any more ships. Kell nodded, understanding the gravity of the task. Understood, Admiral. I'll take the Resolute and a couple of frigates. We'll keep the Cricks busy. As Kell prepared to depart, Drake turned her attention back to the Sentinel. She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. This ship, this ancient relic, was their only hope of surviving what was to come. If they couldn't get it fully operational, the entire coalition might fall to the Cricks. But despite the pressure, Drake felt a glimmer of hope. The Sentinel had already proven its worth, and if Farron was right, there was still more power hidden within its ancient systems. She had to believe that they could unlock it before it was too late. On board the Resolute, Commander Kell led his strike force through the asteroid field, carefully maneuvering between the floating rocks and debris. His mission was simple: buy time. But he knew that even a small skirmish could quickly spiral out of control if the Cricks were more prepared than they anticipated. As they closed in on the Cricks' fleet, Kell could see the enemy ships gathering in the distance. It wasn't the full force yet, but more were arriving by the minute. The Cricks were preparing for a second assault on the Sentinel. Keep your distance, Kell ordered. We're here to harass them, not engage directly. Fire at will, but don't get drawn into a firefight. The Resolute and its accompanying ships opened fire from a distance, launching torpedoes and plasma bolts at the Crick's fleet. The Cricks, taken by surprise, scrambled to respond. Their ships shifted into defensive formations, and soon the void was filled with streaks of energy as both sides exchanged fire. Kel watched the Cricks closely. They were reacting exactly as he had hoped, cautious, unwilling to commit to a full engagement. It bought them the time they needed. But time was running out. Back on the Eternal Sentinel, Farron's team had made progress. The hyperdrive was slowly coming online, and the inscriptions in the core were starting to make sense. Farron's linguist had cracked part of the code, revealing a hidden protocol within the ship's systems, something the original builders had locked away. "It's some kind of failsafe," the engineer explained. "A defensive measure designed to protect the ship in times of extreme danger, but it's been locked down for eons." Farron's eyes widened. "If we can unlock that failsafe, it could give us the edge we need against the Cricks." But unlocking the failsafe wasn't going to be easy. The code was intricate, layered with ancient security measures that had withstood the passage of time. Farron knew they were racing against the clock, but he also knew that rushing could trigger unintended consequences. "Keep working on it," Farron said, determination burning in his eyes. "This could be our ticket to survival." On the edge of the asteroid field, Kel's strike force was starting to feel the pressure. The Cricks had brought in more ships, and their return fire was becoming more coordinated. The Coalition ships were holding their own, but they couldn't hold out forever. Kel knew they had done their job. They had delayed the Cricks long enough. Now it was time to retreat before they were overwhelmed. "Fall back," Kel ordered. "We fought the time we needed. Let's get back to the fleet." The Resolute and its escorts disengaged, weaving through the asteroid field as they made their way back toward the Sentinel. The Cricks pursued for a short distance, but eventually broke off, regrouping for their inevitable assault. As Kel's ships returned to the fleet, Drake stood on the bridge of the Sentinel, watching the tactical display. The Cricks were gathering their forces, preparing for a final push. They would be here soon. And when they arrived, the Eternal Sentinel would need to be ready. Dr. Farron stared at the screen as the final pieces of the ancient code clicked into place. The failsafe was unlocked, and with it, the true power of the Sentinel was revealed. "This is it," Farron said quietly. "We've done it." Admiral Drake looked over at him, her expression unreadable. "What did we unlock?" Farron smiled, a mix of exhaustion and excitement in his eyes. "The Sentinel has been holding back. What we've seen so far is only a fraction of its capabilities. With this failsafe unlocked, we can fully restore the ship's systems and activate weapons that haven't been used in millennia." Drake felt a surge of hope. The Cricks were coming, but now they had a real chance, to fight back. "Then let's give them a fight they'll never forget," Drake said, her voice filled with determination. As the Eternal Sentinel rolled back to life, its ancient power awakened. The stage was set for the final battle. The Cricks would return, and this time, the Coalition would be ready. The battle for the galaxy's future was about to begin, the final stand. The Eternal Sentinel was now fully awake. Its ancient systems, once dormant, thrummed with renewed energy. Admiral Drake stood at the bridge, staring out into the vast darkness where the Cricks fleet was forming. There was no more time to prepare. The enemy was coming. "All hands, prepare for battle," Drake ordered, her voice firm but calm. "This is it." The ship's crew, though wary from the initial skirmish, responded with determined efficiency. They knew what was at stake. If the Sentinel fell, so too would the last hope for the Coalition. The Cricks would sweep across the galaxy unchallenged, subjugating or annihilating every species in their path. "Admiral," Dr. Farron's voice came through the comm, "we've activated the failsafe. The Sentinel's full systems are online, including the advanced weaponry. But there's something else." Drake frowned, glancing over at Farron's image on the comm screen. "What do you mean, something else?" Farron hesitated before responding. It's hard to explain, but the ship's AI, it's like it's evolving. The failsafe triggered more than just weapons. I think we've woken up an intelligence embedded in the Sentinel. It's assisting us. Drake absorbed the information quickly. The Coalition had long suspected that ancient human technology was far more advanced than what had survived into their current era. The idea that the Sentinel possessed some form of AI, one capable of independent thought, was staggering but not entirely surprising. "Is it stable?" Drake asked. "Can we trust it?" "For now, yes," Farron replied. "It's been helping us reroute power, optimize systems, almost as if it's anticipating the battle ahead." Drake nodded. "Then we work with it. We need every advantage we can get." In the darkness of space, the Krix fleet loomed larger by the second. Their warships, sleek and menacing, were preparing for an all-out assault. They had underestimated the humans once, but now they were coming with full force. The Krix wanted to crush the Coalition and the humans who had defied them. Admiral Drake watched as the tactical display filled with red markers, enemy ships moving into attack formation. The Krix had brought more ships than she had anticipated. Hundreds of them. This would be a brutal fight. "All ships, this is Admiral Drake," she said over the fleet-wide comms. "Hold your positions and prepare for engagement. We're the last line of defense. If we fall here, the Krix will overrun the galaxy. But we're not going to let that happen. Today we make our stand. For humanity, for the Coalition, for our future." The Sentinel's engines rolled to life, its ancient power surging through the ship. Shields flared to full strength, and weapon systems hummed with energy. The Coalition fleet formed up around the Sentinel, ready to defend their last hope. The Krix opened fire first. A storm of plasma beams and torpedoes streaked toward the Coalition ships. The Sentinel's shields absorbed the brunt of the initial attack, but some smaller Coalition vessels took direct hits, their hulls crumpling under the force of the Krix assault. "Return fire," Drake commanded. The Coalition ships unleashed a barrage of energy beams, missiles, and railgun slugs, lighting up the void with streaks of deadly light. The Sentinel's advanced weaponry, ancient plasma cannons and particle beams, cut through the Krix ships with terrifying efficiency. Each shot from the Sentinel tore through enemy shields and armor, leaving devastation in its wake. But the Krix were relentless. Their ships swarmed in from all directions, trying to overwhelm the Coalition with sheer numbers. The Sentinel fought valiantly, but even its advanced systems couldn't be everywhere at once. Coalition ships were falling, one by one, as the Krix pressed their attack. On the bridge, Drake's expression remained resolute. They had known this battle would be costly. But despite the losses, the Sentinel was holding the line. "Admiral," we're detecting a massive energy surge in the Krix fleet. Commander Kell shouted over the alarms. "It's some kind of superweapon. They're charging it now." Drake's eyes narrowed. "Can we target it?" "Negative," Kell replied. "It's heavily shielded, buried deep within their fleet. We have to cut through dozens of ships to get a clear shot." The Krix had one last ace up their sleeve. If their superweapon fired, it could wipe out the entire Coalition fleet in a single blast. Drake knew they had to act fast. "Dr. Farron," Drake said, switching to the engineering channel, "do we have anything that can counter that weapon?" Farron's voice came through, hurried but focused. "We've just activated the ship's quantum disruptor. It's an experimental weapon, far more powerful than anything we've seen before. It might be able to destabilize their superweapon, but it's risky. The disruptor could overload our own systems if we push it too far." Drake didn't hesitate. "We don't have a choice. Prepare to fire the disruptor. We need to stop that weapon." Farron and his team worked furiously to bring the quantum disruptor online. It was the Sentinel's most dangerous and untested weapon, but it was their best shot at survival. "Disruptor is ready," Farron said, his voice tense. "We're locked onto the Krix energy signature." "Fire," Drake commanded. The Sentinel's quantum disruptor fired, sending a pulse of energy rippling through space. It collided with the Crick's fleet, creating a massive shockwave that disrupted their systems. The energy buildup in the Crick's superweapon faltered, and their ships began to lose power. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then the Crick's superweapon overloaded, causing a massive explosion that ripped through their fleet. Dozens of Crick's ships were caught in the blast, their hulls shattered by the force of the detonation. Cheers erupted across the Coalition fleet as the Crick's formation broke apart. They had done it. Their desperate gamble had paid off. But Admiral Drake remained focused. The battle wasn't over yet. "All ships, press the attack," she ordered. "We've got them on the ropes." The Sentinel and the remaining Coalition ships surged forward, their weapons tearing into the disoriented Cricks. Without their superweapon and with their fleet in disarray, the Cricks were forced into a full retreat. One by one, their ships blinked out of existence as they jumped to warp, fleeing the battlefield. The Coalition had won. In the aftermath of the battle, the Coalition fleet regrouped around the Eternal Sentinel. The ship, though scarred from the battle, still stood as a symbol of hope and resilience. Admiral Drake stood on the bridge, watching as the last of the Crick's ships vanished from her scanners. "They're gone," Commander Kell said, relief evident in his voice. Drake nodded, but she knew this victory was only the beginning. The Cricks would regroup, and the war was far from over. But for now, they had bought the Coalition time to rebuild, to fortify their defenses, and to prepare for the next battle. "Good work, everyone," Drake said, her voice calm but filled with pride. "We've won today, but we need to stay vigilant. The Cricks will be back, and when they return, we'll be ready." As the crew celebrated their hard-fought victory, Drake allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The Eternal Sentinel had proven itself to be more than just an ancient relic. It was a beacon of hope, a reminder that humanity's strength lay not just in its technology, but in its spirit. And as long as that spirit endured, there would always be a chance for victory. The Sentinel had awoken, and with it, the hope of a new future for the galaxy. New allies, new threats. The Cricks were in retreat, but Admiral Drake knew the war was far from over. The battle had been won, but the Cricks would return, and likely with greater force. However, the victory at the edge of Coalition space had given them something invaluable: time. Time to rebuild and fortify their defenses, time to prepare for whatever the Cricks might throw at them next. As the Coalition fleet licked its wounds and regrouped, something unexpected began to happen. A message came through from a distant sector of space, from a species previously unknown to the Coalition. They called themselves the Yuvani, and they had watched the battle with great interest. Drake sat in the command chair of the Eternal Sentinel as the Yuvani's message played on the holoprojector before her. The Yuvani leader, a tall, slender figure with shimmering skin that shifted colors with each movement, spoke in a voice that sounded almost musical. "We have long observed the conflict between the Cricks and the Coalition," the Yuvani leader said. "And we have chosen to remain neutral until now. The awakening of the Eternal Sentinel has changed things. We believe the humans have the potential to shift the balance of power in the galaxy. We offer you our support." The offer was a surprise. The Coalition had long tried to recruit other species to their cause, but many had either remained neutral or sided with the Cricks, seeing them as the inevitable victors. But the Yuvani's offer of aid came with no small amount of caution. "What kind of support are you offering?" Drake asked, her tone measured. She was not about to blindly accept help from a species she knew nothing about. The Yuvani leader tilted their heads slightly, as if considering the question. "We possess technology that could greatly enhance your defenses and fleet capabilities. Our ships, though fewer in number, are equipped with advanced shielding and stealth systems. Additionally, we can offer intelligence on Crick's movements and strategies." Drake leaned back in her chair, studying the shimmering figure before her. The offer was tempting, especially the intelligence on Crick's movements, but it also felt too convenient. Why had the Yuvani waited until now to reveal themselves? Why offer help only after the Sentinel had awoken? You must understand our hesitation, Drake said. Why offer your assistance now? What has changed? The Yuvani leader's skin shifted to a deep shade of blue, a sign of contemplation. We are a cautious species, Admiral. We do not involve ourselves in the affairs of others lightly. But the Krix represent a threat to us all. Their conquest will not stop with your coalition. And now that we see humanity's potential, we believe an alliance could be mutually beneficial. Drake considered their words carefully. The Krix were indeed a threat to the entire galaxy, and the coalition could use all the help it could get. But there was something about the Yuvani's sudden appearance that made her wary. She needed to be sure that their offer was genuine. I will consider your offer, Drake said finally. But I will need more than words to convince me of your sincerity. If you truly wish to aid the coalition, show us your technology. Prove that you are willing to stand with us against the Krix. The Yuvani leader's skin shimmered again, this time in a light, pale hue that resembled satisfaction. Very well, Admiral. We will send a delegation to your capital world with a demonstration of our technology. I hope this will ease your concerns. With that, the communication ended, and the holoprojector blinked off. Drake turned to Commander Kell, who had been silently observing the exchange. What do you think? She asked. Kell rubbed his chin thoughtfully. They seem sincere, but we can't be too careful. I'd recommend sending a scout to observe their movements and make sure this isn't some kind of trap. Drake nodded in agreement. Have a scout ship prepared to shadow the Yuvani delegation. I want to know everything we can about them before they arrive. If they're playing us, we need to be ready. A few days later, the Yuvani delegation arrived. Their ships were unlike anything the Coalition had seen before, sleek and elegant, with shimmering hulls that seemed to blend into the fabric of space itself. The Yuvani leader from the holoprojector was among the delegation, and they greeted Drake with the same calm, composed demeanor. The demonstration was impressive. The Yuvani showed off their advanced shielding technology, which allowed their ships to withstand attacks that would have obliterated a Coalition vessel. They also demonstrated their stealth systems, which rendered their ships nearly invisible to enemy sensors. But what truly caught Drake's attention was their intelligence on the Krix. The Yuvani had been monitoring Krix movements for years, and they provided detailed reports on Krix fleet deployments, supply lines, and even internal politics. The information was invaluable, and it gave the Coalition a much-needed edge in their war effort. Still, Drake remained cautious. The Yuvani had proven their worth, but she knew that alliances in the galaxy were often fragile. Trust had to be earned, and even then, it could be easily broken. Back on Earth, the news of the Yuvani alliance spread quickly. The Coalition leadership was divided. Some saw the Yuvani as a lifeline, while others worried about the potential strings attached to their assistance. The debate raged in the halls of government, but in the end, the decision was made to accept the Yuvani's help, albeit with caution. As the Yuvani ships began integrating with the Coalition fleet, Admiral Drake and her crew prepared for the next phase of the war. The Krix were weakened, but far from defeated. They would regroup and come back stronger, and when they did, the Coalition would need every advantage they could muster. The Eternal Sentinel had bought them time, but the war was far from over. New alliances brought new opportunities and new dangers, and Drake knew that the Krix were not the only threat lurking in the galaxy. As the fleet prepared for its next mission, Drake couldn't shake the feeling that something larger was at play. The Krix, the Yuvani, the ancient human technology, they were all pieces of a much bigger puzzle, one that was only beginning to reveal itself. But whatever the future held, Admiral Drake was ready to face it. The Eternal Sentinel stood as a testament to humanity's strength, and as long as it remained, there was hope. Hope that the Coalition could survive, and perhaps even thrive, in a galaxy fraught with danger. And so, with a new ally at their side and the shadow of the Krix looming ever larger, the next chapter of the war began. The hidden truth. With the Yuvani's assistance integrated into the Coalition fleet, Admiral Drake prepared for the inevitable counterattack from the Krix. But beneath the surface of these preparations, there was an unsettling feeling in her gut. Something still didn't add up, and she couldn't shake the sense that a greater mystery lay hidden, just out of reach. The Yuvani had delivered on their promises. Their technology significantly boosted the Coalition's defensive and offensive capabilities. The intelligence on Crick's fleet movements had allowed Drake and her commanders to predict and preemptively counter Crick's attacks before they even reached Coalition space. For the first time in years, there was a glimmer of hope that the tide of the war might turn in their favor. Yet, Admiral Drake couldn't allow herself to grow complacent. The Cricks had been silent for too long, and Drake suspected they were planning something massive, possibly more destructive than anything they had unleashed before. A few weeks later, the tension broke. An urgent communication came from Coalition High Command. The Cricks were amassing a colossal fleet at the edge of the Morvian Expanse, a region that had long been considered too dangerous for any fleet to traverse due to its unstable gravity wells and the mysterious remnants of an ancient, long-extinct civilization. This fleet was unlike anything the Coalition had ever seen. It was not just massive in size, but also bristling with strange new weapons and technologies that had never been observed before in Crick's hands. Even more alarming was the fact that the Cricks were moving toward the Morvian Nexus, a critical point in the galaxy's structure that, if controlled, could allow them to create devastating ripples across entire star systems. Drake immediately called a meeting of her senior staff aboard the Eternal Sentinel. The holomap displayed the ominous movement of the Crick's fleet, advancing with terrifying precision toward the Nexus. "We can't let them take the Nexus," Drake said, her voice steady but firm. "If they do, they'll be able to destabilize entire star systems, wiping out planets and fleets alike." Commander Kell frowned, staring at the map. "The Cricks don't usually operate in this region. What's changed?" Drake leaned forward. "That's what we need to figure out. The Yuvani's intelligence didn't mention anything about this. Either the Cricks have developed these new technologies recently, or..." She paused, the thoughts settling in. "Or someone is helping them." The room fell silent. The implication was clear. The Cricks might have a hidden ally, just as the Coalition had gained the Yuvani. "We need answers," Drake said. "I want a recon team sent into the Expanse immediately. We need to know what's waiting for us out there." The Coalition recon team, consisting of 2 stealth frigates, entered the Morvian Expanse days later. The Expanse was as dangerous as ever, with gravitational anomalies and strange energy readings making navigation a challenge. But the team pressed on, cloaked from Crick's sensors. What they discovered shocked them. Deep within the Expanse, hidden among the ruins of the ancient civilization, the Cricks had constructed massive research facilities. But it wasn't just Crick's ships that patrolled the area. There were Yuvani vessels among them. The Yuvani had been helping the Cricks all along, providing them with advanced technology in exchange for access to the ancient Morvian ruins. The recon team quickly transmitted their findings back to the Coalition before retreating, their cover nearly blown. When the recon report reached Admiral Drake, she felt a cold fury rising within her. The Yuvani had played them all, offering their aid to the Coalition, while secretly assisting the Cricks in a bid to control the Morvian Nexus. They had manipulated both sides of the conflict, hoping to come out on top regardless of who won. Drake wasted no time. She ordered an emergency session of the Coalition leadership to discuss the revelation. "The Yuvani cannot be trusted," Drake said to the assembled leaders. "They've been playing both sides from the beginning, feeding us just enough to keep us fighting the Cricks, while they quietly help the Cricks seize control of the most powerful ancient technologies in the galaxy. We must cut ties with them immediately." The Coalition leaders were in shock, but they couldn't deny the evidence. The Yuvani had used them, and now the Cricks were on the verge of controlling a power that could shift the balance of the galaxy permanently in their favor. "We have to stop them," Drake continued. "We can't let the Cricks seize the Nexus." The leaders agreed, and preparations for a massive assault on the Morvian Expanse began. The final battle for the Morvian Nexus was unlike any the galaxy had seen before. The Coalition fleet, reinforced by the Eternal Sentinel, clashed with the Krix forces in a chaotic and brutal engagement that stretched across light years of space. The Yuvani, realizing that their deception had been uncovered, withdrew from the conflict, leaving the Krix to fend for themselves. But the damage had already been done. The Krix had gained access to ancient Morvian technologies, and their ships now wielded weapons of unimaginable power. As the Coalition fought desperately to reach the Nexus, Admiral Drake led the charge aboard the Sentinel, its massive guns tearing through Krix warships like paper. But the Krix were relentless, and their new weapons inflicted heavy losses on the Coalition fleet. In the midst of the battle, Drake received an urgent message from her science officer. "Admiral, we've analyzed the energy readings from the Nexus. The Krix are attempting to activate it. If they succeed, they could destabilize its entire region of space." Drake knew what had to be done. "Prepare the Sentinel's main weapon," she ordered. "We're going to destroy the Nexus." The crew hesitated for a moment. Destroying the Nexus would mean losing access to its immense power, but it was the only way to prevent the Krix from using it as a weapon. The Sentinel charged its primary cannon, a weapon powered by the same ancient technology that had kept the ship hidden for centuries. As the cannon reached full power, Drake gave the order to fire. A blinding beam of energy shot from the Sentinel, striking the Nexus with devastating force. The ancient structure began to collapse in on itself, its energy destabilizing and releasing a massive shockwave that rippled across the battlefield. The Krix ships were caught in the shockwave, many of them disintegrating instantly. The Coalition fleet, though battered, managed to pull back just in time to avoid the worst of the blast. As the dust settled, the Krix fleet was in ruins, their bid for control of the Nexus shattered. The Coalition had won, but the cost had been high. In the aftermath of the battle, the Yuvani were denounced as traitors, their ships barred from Coalition space. The Krix, weakened and disorganized, retreated to their core worlds, their plans for galactic dominance in tatters. But the war was far from over. The Krix would rebuild, and the galaxy remained a dangerous place. Yet, for now, the Coalition had bought itself another chance. A chance to rebuild, to grow stronger, and to face whatever threats the future might bring. And as Admiral Drake stood aboard the bridge of the Eternal Sentinel, gazing out at the stars, she knew that humanity's role in the galaxy was only just beginning. The ancient secrets of the past had been awakened, and new challenges awaited. But with the strength of the Sentinel and the determination of humanity, she was confident that they could face whatever came next. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, but humanity had proven once again that it was a force to be reckoned with, and as long as they stood united, there was nothing they couldn't overcome.